G'day you mob, Pete here, and this is another episode of Aussie English, the number one place for anyone and everyone wanting to learn Australian English. So today I have a Goss episode for you where I sit down with my old man, my father, Ian Smissen, and we talk about the week's news, whether locally down under here in Australia or non-locally overseas in other parts of the world. Okay, and we sometimes also talk about whatever comes to mind, right? If we can think of something interesting to share with you guys related to us or Australia, we also talk about that in the Goss. So these episodes are specifically designed to try and give you content about many different topics where we're obviously speaking in English and there are multiple people having a natural and spontaneous conversation in English. So it is particularly good to improve your listening skills. In order to complement that though, I really recommend that you join the podcast membership or the academy membership at aussieenglish.com.au, where you will get access to the full transcripts of these episodes, the PDFs, the downloads, and you can also use the online PDF reader to read and listen at the same time. Okay, so if you really want to improve your listening skills fast, get the transcript, listen and read at the same time, keep practicing, and that is the quickest way to level up your English. Anyway, I've been rabbiting on a bit. I've been talking a bit. Let's just get into this episode, guys. Smack the bird, and let's get into it. Dad.
Pete.
What's going on?
What's going on? We're doing Noah speak, are we?
What's going on? Scumming.
Yeah, what's going on? Yeah, past scumming. Vovo scumming.
I found that so cute recently with him learning English and Portuguese, just the way in which he obviously hears words or interprets words. So with that dad scumming, he doesn't realize it's dad is coming that's being contracted. He just thinks it's dad and scumming.
Yeah.
Dad scumming.
Yeah. Well, dad's coming we say it in one long word.
Well, that's what he hears. Dad scumming.
He's passing it in, the syllables in a different place. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
So he's creating words out of it, but he doesn't know where the actual passing should be.
Well, and
fine.
The way in which he puts phrases together too with his own grammar of dada carro, dad's car. Or dad car.
Yeah, dad car.
Effectively.
Vovo's car.
And it makes sense. He hasn't worked out the possessive, what would you call that? The possessive, what is it called where you have, German has a lot of them, cases,
yeah,
right?
Possessive case where you actually put the apostrophe S on the end of something.
Yeah, English got rid of all its cases hundreds of years ago. But
except the possessive one.
Yeah, well, that's it. So what's been going on?
Not a lot, really. No, I went to the football yesterday, which was good fun.
Yeah. How was that? Just by yourself with all your mates?
Just by myself with all my mates, yeah. I got there because I drove up to Melbourne and did some photographs for the...
Star's just driving me nuts.
Yeah, and you got grot on the beard as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I drove up to Melbourne in the morning and took some photographs of some of the old family sites for the family history book that I'm writing.
Mm-hmm. You keep plugging this, Dad. You're going to sell it to the listeners?
Yeah, I'll sell it to the listeners. My family history would be really interesting to about 6 people.
Yeah, all the listeners who are related to me.
All the listeners, yeah, exactly.
Future Noah.
Yeah. And I'd finished that, and then it started sort of drizzling rain, and I thought there's no point in going off and doing something else, so I just drove into town and
you were going to do some photography, weren't you? I think that's what Mum said.
I was actually photographing some of the houses that my great-grandparents lived in, and I was going to photograph the houses that my mother grew up in, but they are so changed now. They've been renovated so much. The houses still exist. They haven't been pulled down, but they're unrecognisable from what I remember as a child, so it's sort of pointless taking a photograph of this is the house that no longer looks like the house that my mother lived in.
I guess I had in my head that you were going to be doing some street photography or something. Yeah.
No. So
as well as or after
it was just to drive around. Oh, there's the house. Here's the address. Bang, go click. And so then just went parked in West Melbourne and walked down to the football. And I got there about an hour and 20 minutes before the game started. And it was just sort of drizzly rain outside. And because it's in the indoor stadium, I thought, I'm better off sitting inside. So when I got in there must have been about 100 people in there. I took that photograph of me with and sent it to the family group with just my head and thousands of empty seats.
So was it packed later on or not at all?
It was about half full. I think there's about 27,000 there, so which is almost exactly half full. It's a 55,000 seat stadium. So.
It does always blow my mind. You know, we watch these movies and TV shows about like Rome, where you see people in the Colosseum and gladiators, you know, fighting lions and slaves and other gladiators and everything, and that was how they sort of got their entertainment back then. It's so funny that 2,000 years later, we have the same
principle
setup of this huge stadium. How do we get as many people as possible to be able to see this one sport and spectate?
And effectively, it's a battle between two bunches of people. It's not Christians fighting lions anymore, but it's two groups of people who are competing in a semi well defined sport. AFL's always for those who aren't familiar with it, it's sort of difficult to understand because it's not like any other sport. But once you do know it, it's really good. But so that was fun. You
wonder how those things started, though, right? Like how those first team sports began. There were some interesting things that I was reading up on. I think about the Mayans. It may have been the Aztecs or the Mayans, but effectively those huge civilizations that they had in Central and South America. What it would have been up until the period of Columbus going to America, after which it sort of all fell. But for the last, before that, whatever that was, 400 years ago, they were around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And they had these huge team-based sports that I think were similar to things like hockey and soccer.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, how on earth, who were the first people to come up with team-based sports? Because you would imagine back in the day, thousands of years ago when you were hunter-gatherers, you were in tribes, small groups of people, and like the Indigenous people in Australia, you don't really hear too much about them ever having played games, let alone team sports.
No. Although
it's a luxury, right?
There is a lot of sort of legend around the history of Australian football that it may well have come from an Indigenous game.
Yeah.
Because it's as old as any other football. It's not like it evolved from soccer. Rugby evolved from soccer because some school kid picked up the ball and ran with it, and everybody went, "Oh, this might make a cool game."
At least that's what we reckon.
Yeah, that's the legend.
Yeah,
and so it sort of evolved out of one, but so it evolved at the same time. Melbourne Football Club, which is an Australian football club, is the oldest football club in the world. It's older than any soccer club or any other club, football club in the world. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And Geelong Football Club is the second oldest because there's not much point in having one football club. You need to play against someone.
It's funny, isn't it? Because so many people will always tell you AFL footy isn't the real football. You shouldn't call it football. Soccer is the real football, and it's not called soccer. It's football, and you're like. Obviously now AFL is potentially even older than soccer.
People were playing soccer, but and I'm sure there were clubs around then. Melbourne Football Club was not the first football club around, I'm sure, but it's the oldest existing one. So
I'll have to look into that, the origin of some of these group-based sport, because I can imagine it was a luxury. You would have had games, you would have had things that you could do with one another to pass the time, to sharpen your skills as young kids.
I think that's it. Part of it has come from either parents inventing games for their kids to play or kids just making it up. You get a bunch of kids together and, oh, look, here's something round and rolls. Well, can we kick it? Yeah.
Let's chase it.
Yeah. Or, I can hit this thing with a stick. Well, if you grab a stick and you try and hit it as well, let's see what happens.
I bet I can hit it further than you.
Exactly. So I think there's a lot of those sort of games have evolved out of just kids making stuff up. But I think from the other end of it too, once they become sort of recognised games, then I'm sure there would have been, my little tribe, comes across your little tribe, says, hey, do you want to put your 5 blokes against my 5 blokes, or 20 or 50 and see what, just to see if we can do it. So it becomes that sort of mock battles.
It could have been that sort of thing, I guess, with the corroborees in Indigenous Australian groups. Again, I'm speaking totally out of ignorance. I'm sure I can
not even just the
research
Indigenous Australians, Indigenous people all around.
Or the Africans as well. I know a lot of tribes in Africa will gather together to do things like compete against one another, or, trading things, or even looking for partners, wives and husbands. They come together in big, annual or monthly or whatever it is group celebrations. And I guess that's what would have happened with the corroboree, and maybe gaming too would have been part of bringing everyone together, and sort of as well as competing in a non-violent way. Because my thing originally would have been, do you reckon there was just, two tribes, and they were fighting one another, and they were like, it'd be really fun if we could do this without killing each other.
Yeah. So let's throw a ball into it and see who can kick it the furthest.
That's it. Yeah. So
and then we'll kick it back the other way.
Let's not poke holes in one another. We can do this and then play again tomorrow.
Yeah, so I went to the football, and the other interesting thing is that it was announced, and I wasn't aware of it until I was there. It was announced yesterday morning that there are now 1 million AFL club members in Australia. So each club has paid memberships, and there are now 1 million. And you look and go, what does that number mean? And there's just over 25 million people in Australia. So 4% of the entire population of the country are paid members of 18 AFL clubs. So that I think that demonstrates how obsessive Australians are with sport, and particular football. Yeah. So
why do you think that AFL has never completely swamped Australia and sort of reached, the threshold of being the sport that everyone loves in Australia, and vice versa, rugby hasn't done the inverse? Because obviously, for those of you who don't know, AFL is very much a southern part of Australia kind of sport. There's obviously teams in places like, New South Wales and Queensland, but by and large, those states are much more interested in rugby league and have a larger following there. And rugby union. And union and league have teams in places like Victoria, but by and large, it's AFL that everyone goes to see, not the rugby.
Yeah.
Why do you think there's that break?
Well, I think, initially, I'm sure it just came from, because Australian football started in Melbourne. The game was effectively invented by kids in Melbourne. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure, I think it was Melbourne Grammar and Scotch College played the first ever competitive game, ironically on the paddock that is now the MCG. So that's sort of sacred ground, really, that I'm not sure it's exactly where the MCG was, but it is now, but it's on that basic bit of land.
And the idea too, at least from what I've heard, is that AFL was a sport that was effectively just used to keep people fit for cricket season in summer, right?
Because cricket was an established sport in summer, and then it became, we've made up this sport, so well just get our cricketers to do it.
Too many cricketers are getting fat during winter. We're getting thin and fit so they can play cricket.
Now, I'm not sure how much that is a convenient story that's been wrapped around the fact that if you've got, but at the time it was men, young men or boys playing cricket, and you offer them something to do during winter, I'm sure they would have done it because it was entertaining to do, not to keep fit for cricket necessarily. Mm-hmm. But
it's funny how they end up paired too. I remember we having to do sports at high school. I went to Geelong College, and it was it's a private school, and as a result, for whatever reason, private schools tend to make competing in sports mandatory.
Yeah.
So you have to pick a sport in summer and in winter, and it seemed that a lot of the kids who played footy would play cricket, and a lot of the cricketers would play footy. It would be like
played soccer or tennis.
Yeah, I didn't. I always. I liked playing the sports. I didn't really like watching the sports. So cricket always made me want to kill myself because it was just too long and not much happening.
Yeah.
I can imagine being the bowler or being the batsman would be amazing. But anyone else there is just a lot of standing around staring.
I played cricket for a while, and one of the challenges with that is I was a bowler, and so bowlers are much more engaged in the game than batsmen are.
Yeah.
But because at least a bowler is active while you're on the field.
The bowler doesn't have the chance of missing and not interacting with the ball. Exactly, he has the ball every time.
but then you play 2-day games. Effectively, the notion is that your team will bat for one day and the other team will bat for the next day.
Yeah. Even
though you can both bat twice, but that rarely happens in a 2-day game. But if you're a bowler as well, we'd be fielding one on the first day, and I'd get to bowl for half the day, which is great, in terms of participation. That's what you're there for.
Yeah.
And then the next week, when it's the other team's turn to bat, because I was a bowler and a pretty average batter, I often didn't get to bat at all. So you turn up to play cricket for the day, and you sit on the sideline and you're either scoring or, particularly playing in lower grades of cricket, they don't have official umpires, or if they do, they often don't have two because you have to have two umpires on the field. And so you'd have one official umpire, and then the batting team would provide the other umpire. And so you'd either be umpiring or scoring or just sitting around doing nothing. And and I eventually looked at this and thought, this is stupid. So I went back to playing tennis. Well, at least then you knew who were going to be playing unless it was raining. So.
I think I learned this from primary school when I went to, recess and lunch times. You'd just run down to the oval and I would play cricket and footy.
Yeah.
But it would be that thing where I remember a lot of the kids would be dying to be the bowler or be the batter. And no one wanted to be a fielder.
Yeah, all you do is just run. And most of the time the ball doesn't come near you, so you just stand there. Yeah.
And so it would be that thing of, okay, I'll bowl, guys, and then they'll be like, all right, you've had your over, next person. They'll be like, oh, sweet, all right, I'll wait to bat. I'll be next or third next or whatever. And then you get in there and get bowled out, and then you're like, yeah, fuck this, I'm out. See you guys. Like, I'm going to go do something else. I'm not feeling it. Screw this. Yeah, exactly. So it would always be that thing of like, you'd have like all these people lined up to bowl and bat, but there'd be like one person fielding. Yeah,
exactly. Whereas kids soccer in particular is great fun to watch. Little kids soccer. Remember when you started? Yeah, I started soccer at the under 8s. And
did I? Under 8s.
Under 8s. And that basically means because you've got two goalkeepers who, stand at each end and the ball never gets near them. So they're just standing there getting cold and 20 other kids just running around chasing a ball. So at least you're sort of active the whole time because you can't teach 7-year-olds tactics of, you go and stand over there on the wing and when they kick it to you, you kick it over there. It's just
everyone
there's the ball, run and get it.
He's on your team. You just took it from your own teammate. I don't care. I just want to be part of it.
Yeah, so, it's good old Australian sport. So, it was quite interesting to notice that, there's sort of 1 million members in AFL, which is, I just sat and went, it's logical when you look at it because obviously your average, I think the team with the highest membership is about just over 100,000 and the lowest is just under 50,000. Richmond, I think now.
Richmond has the most?
Yeah, although I think now it might actually be West Coast Eagles.
I guess they don't have much to compete with.
The whole state and only 2 teams. So, so the highest teams have got 100,000 plus. The lowest around 50,000. So if you average that out and multiply it by 18, it quickly works out to be 1 million.
It must be pretty interesting being from those other states too of South Australia. Again, 2 teams, right? Mm-hmm. So the Adelaide Crows and the Port Adelaide Electric people.
Yeah, Port Power. the
Electric
lightning.
Bolt.
Yeah.
And then you've got, the West Coast Eagles.
And Fremantle Dockers.
Fremantle Dockers over in Western Australia. It must be very cool being there because you obviously have effectively 2 choices.
Yeah, and it becomes a real sort of us and them thing. Whereas
in Melbourne, you've got how many teams?
Victoria, there are 10 teams.
10 teams.
9 in Melbourne and 1 in Geelong.
So you find people that barrack for teams from all over. You don't have to be from the place.
Yeah, it's not tribal,
right?
In that geographic sense. It used to be when I was a kid. If you grew up in Collingwood, you barracked for Collingwood. If you grew up in Melbourne, nobody grew up in Melbourne, and that was part of the problem. The city of Melbourne didn't have residents back in those days. Whereas, if you grew up in St Kilda, you're a St Kilda supporter, and the Melbourne teams in the Victorian Football League, pretty much, were also zoned to all the other districts around the city and in the state. So, where I grew up, even though it wasn't close to Melbourne or St Kilda particularly, our zone, the suburb I lived in, recruiting zone was split down the middle between Melbourne and St Kilda. So most of my friends were Melbourne or St Kilda supporters. Yeah. I ended up being an Essendon supporter for bizarre reasons, but
just the original hipster going against the grain.
Yeah, exactly, going against the grain. Well, it was more a bit of good fortune that my first football game that I ever went to, my uncle took me. I was 4.5. And so I didn't know anything about it. But hey, go to the football. Yeah, I'll go to the football. I'll watch it on television once. That'll do. It was Melbourne playing Essendon. Mm-hmm. And he was a Melbourne supporter. So I sort of went there going, we'll be barracking for Melbourne, supporting Melbourne. And Essendon won. So by the time halfway through the game Essendon was winning, I became an Essendon supporter.
Going for them, guys.
Yeah. And then that year they won the premiership. So that sealed it. The only game I'd ever seen, they won, and then they ended up winning the whole thing that year. So, nearly 60 years later, I'm still an Essendon supporter.
You've got to tell the story about my sister and how she decided to go for North Melbourne.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was, 1992. And it was about the 4th or 5th round for the year. I took you to the football. It was actually Essendon playing West Coast Eagles at the MCG, and I took you. You were 5. And you decided that you wanted to buy an Essendon flag while we were there. So we bought an Essendon flag, and every time they kicked a goal, you were waving the flag and cheering and carrying on, and came home with very proud of the flag. And then Annie had been on and on and on at me for the rest of the year, for like another 4 or 5 months, because we went early in the season. About, I want to go to the football. I want to go to the football. She's 3 years old.
You don't even like the football.
Taking your 3-year-old daughter to the football all day is, sitting at the football's fine. Going to the local football and you sit there is fine. If you get sick of it, you come home. But I want to go to the toilet. Okay.
This hits home now, considering Annika, my sister, has a 3-year-old daughter. Yeah. And I can't imagine her ever putting her hand up and saying, to the football. Let's go to the footy. Yeah.
So in the end, a friend of ours who also had a 3-year-old daughter, he and I decided it was the last round of the year.
Hi, Ralph.
And he and I decided, well, if we're going to do this, then we might as well do it in pairs, because then if you need a toilet stop or whatever, you can at least have somebody to mind the seats and all the other paraphernalia you bring with a 3-year-old. Mm-hmm. And so we went, and she decided that she was going to be a Bulldog supporter because she liked the Bulldogs that year. She'd just seen them.
So this is Footscray?
Footscray, yeah. Footscray Football Club, which is now their brand name is the Western Bulldogs.
Yeah.
And so she was a, big, I'm going to be a Bulldog supporter. I want to support the Bulldogs. All right. Well, fortunately the Bulldogs were playing, and her friend, the other 3-year-old, her grandfather used to play for North Melbourne. So their family were North Melbourne supporters.
Yep.
And so we thought, well, it's the Bulldogs playing North Melbourne. That's it. Let Ralph, you and me take the kids and we'll go. And Annie and I got off the train at Richmond Station, which is right next to the MCG, as I had done with you. But she had this thing about, I want to buy a flag. And, so I thought, all right, fine, we'll go. And we got off there, and they got off the station, and the underpass that goes from where the railway, platforms are, goes under the railway lines to get to the side of the, station that the football ground is on. They had tables up selling merchandise. And so I said, I'll go over and buy your flag. No, I want to do it. And so, all right, well, here's your $5. And she came back with a Kangaroos flag. And I went, oh no, what am I going to do? This is, your little 3-year-old, you feel for her. She's stuffed up. How do I fix it? And I said, you can't sort of bite a little bit off that cake. You've just got to hoe in. So I just said to her, well, what happened to the Bulldogs? And she said, the Bulldogs were ugly. I like the Kangaroos better. And so she became a Kangaroo supporter. And, Kangaroos in her childhood and teenage years, the Kangaroos won 2 premierships. The Bulldogs did nothing. So Good choice. Yeah, she did well.
Far out. Wow. Anything else to mention, footy-wise? That was about it. Who won? Who was playing and who won?
The
other day?
Well, the Bombers and the Dockers, my team, Essendon Football Club, because I'm a member, so I only go to see them play because I've already paid to go. Mm-hmm. And they were playing the Fremantle Dockers. So the Purple Haze, as
have
they call them.
Have they won any premiership yet?
No.
Premiership yet?
No, they have not.
No, they have not.
No.
They're a relatively young team.
Relatively young, yes. So they've still got a while to go before they're likely to. They got to a grand final once and got thoroughly beaten, but
why do you think Australian rules football is seen as so confusing? Because surely there are plenty of other sports that like soccer apart that have got quite a few rules and everything, or is it just that there are a lot of different rules?
Well, it's like no other game. It's a 360-degree game, which very few other games are. Almost all other football type games are 180-degree games, so that you've got 2 teams opposing each other, and one team's trying to go one way and the other team's trying to go the other way. And you don't go backwards.
Yeah.
Whereas in Australian football, yes, you're both, teams are trying to get to one end. So, I'm kicking one way, you're kicking the other way. And we're, trying to kick goals at the opposite ends of the ground, but we can go anywhere we like. And all players can go anywhere on the field, except at the setup at the beginning where they've sort of zoned and you can only have a particular number of players in different areas. But so from a point of view of if you're used to watching those 180-degree games, it's just chaos. You've got no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And because it's just so different, other than Gaelic football is probably the closest to it.
Soccer's pretty similar in terms of the 2 dimensions, the 360 degrees as opposed to a 180, like rugby or what is the American one called? American football.
Yeah, it is a bit, but it's still, when you look at a game, if you sort of take a snapshot of a game, literal photograph, you would have most of the players from one team at one end and most of the players from the other team at the other end facing each other. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Australian football, they're all over the field.
Yeah.
And
you've got spots, right?
Yeah. At particular times, it would be very difficult to work out who was going in which direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the last thing I guess I wanted to ask you about was, what do you think is going to happen in the future with the amount we're learning about head trauma?
Yeah.
And the effects it's having? Because you and I both watched a ABC series episode of You Can't Ask That, where they had ex-footballers and rugby players. And one question was about, like, are you scared about I forgot what it's called. There's a certain acronym.
Post-concussion syndrome.
Yeah, where you end up with effectively like a kind of Alzheimer's thing where you get brain damage from repeated knocks to the head. And it doesn't even have to be that you were knocked out, right? It can just be collisions, which is why for soccer, I think at a lot of schools now they've banned the header. So you can't head the ball because apparently numerous repeated, smacks of the ball with your head are actually potentially underlying this brain injury
and I think
as well.
Particularly with kids, then, the two kids going up trying to head the ball are more likely to bang their own heads together as well.
Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE.
There you go.
That's what it's called. So my transcriber is going to love having to deal with that. Yeah. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
Yeah.
I can't even do it.
Yeah. Head trauma.
CTE, yeah. But yeah, so...
Yes. Sports all over the world, contact sports all over the world now are concerned about it, and they're all bringing in... The AFL has done it. Soccer is doing it. I watched the replay of the FA Cup final, the English soccer cup final yesterday, and there was somebody went down with a
concussion or something.
Well, a head injury. At least got knocked in the head and went down. And there's always the thing about soccer players is they'll take a dive when somebody sneezes at the other end of the field, But now they have and I wasn't aware of it in British football, but now they have a very similar thing to Australian football of as soon as there is a risk of concussion, basically the game stops.
Yeah.
You have the medical people come out and checking the person on the field and then decide to take them off. Rather than back in the old days, it was, well, can you stand up? Yeah, righto, play on.
And they were saying in this episode, one of them was saying, my grandfather said it's better to leave in the back of an ambulance than to step out of a contest. Yeah. So to avoid running into where the ball is to contest it, to enter the contest with another player, if you avoid that because you're worried about getting injured, shame on you. How embarrassing. Yeah, exactly. You should try and do that even if you fail and end up in an ambulance. At least you tried. Yeah. Is that sort of obviously that's going to have to go the way of the dodo.
It's that macho thing of, you're better off injuring yourself for the team.
I think that's why I always not hated, but never really wanted to play football. I was like, I just am not going to blindly put myself in these positions to have neck injuries or head injuries or have my face smashed up.
Exactly.
I'll do jiu-jitsu instead.
Yeah, well, exactly. Broken nose, cauliflower ear. Yeah,
great.
But you're less likely in jiu-jitsu to get concussion contact-based injuries.
Well, and then again with MMA, I was like, fuck this. Yeah. There's no chance. The amount of guys that I know who've had only a few concussions, and you can already see that they've slowed down in terms of just how they can speak, and you're just like, nah. Respect, but no.
Yeah. Well, that was the old boxers, who used back in my day.
Punch drunk.
That used to just get punch drunk. They just called them punchy.
Yeah.
Because they, slurred their speech and started.
Unless you're Floyd Mayweather, who's never been knocked out.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. But again, you look at, this is a completely, tangential topic, but you look at somebody like Floyd Mayweather and his last fight, he got $50 million to fight in, and he lost. So just $50 million to turn up. And you sit there and why would you do the next one? Right?
I know.
I think he's now the highest paid sports person ever in terms of prize money, not sponsorship.
Yeah.
I think so in terms of, actually winning money or getting paid directly to compete.
He's 44 years old and he's worth $1.2 billion. Yeah.
So why would he fight again?
Wow, that's it. You sort of like, what are you smoking?
Yeah, exactly. So
insane. Anyway.
Yeah.
So you reckon the sports are do you reckon people will end up wearing helmets?
Well, there's the helmet one. And again, I'm not a neurologist or a neurosurgeon. So this is, purely my opinion based on what I've read, but there seems to be a fair bit of controversy around whether helmets actually work or not.
Your brain's still moving
because
inside.
Your brain is still moving inside your head. It will stop you getting break injuries, like having somebody bang your head and you actually get a broken skull, but it's not going to stop the concussions necessarily. So, whereas the bigger, stronger helmets, certainly the helmets they wear in AFL don't. They're basically just a leather, reinforced leather helmet. The bigger, effectively crash helmets on you, are you then prone to things like neck injuries and all sorts of things. So, I just think now people are, sports are changing rules to protect the head, which is a good thing. People are a lot more aware of it now, and that the old, better off leaving in an ambulance than not going in for the ball. Mentality has changed. And I think people now are saying, well, if there is a likelihood of a head injury, you're off. And AFL introduced it a few years ago of, if there is any likelihood, then it's automatically off the field for 20 minutes. And you're getting assessed and then you can come back on again. And so they introduced this idea of you can have a replacement for somebody who had a concussion, that the team shouldn't be disadvantaged by a medical problem. And I think those sort of things are changing. So hopefully it'll all be better. And there's certainly now a lot of sports people. I know there's some American footballs, a couple of Australian footballs and things who have effectively donated their brains to neurological science when they die, to say, use me, test me, see what you can do. And there's a new study being done now where all junior footballers in Victoria, I'm not sure if it's Australia-wide, but all junior footballers in Victoria are being tested before a season starts. And any time they get a concussion or a head knock or something, they'll be retested. And they're not just the, what's your name and what day is it and where are you sort of questions. They're actually, psychomotor tests where you're actually having to, cognitive tests where you're answering questions, but you're also having to do things and, can you do this complicated task? And because you've got a pre-test at the beginning of the season, and, if you do worse than that, then there's a problem and you're not allowed to play again until you can match your preseason score and doing those sort of things. So we're getting a lot better, in the world of understanding that the only alternative is just we don't play those sports.
I think the alternative is that you just sign a disclaimer. Like with, we know with boxing, with MMA, that head trauma can cause, you can die. People have died on the AFL field. Maybe not necessarily in AFL, but they played
football field.
Dying that.
Football.
Yeah, exactly. So from neck injuries or brain injuries or whatever, it's like, if you want to do it, at least be aware of the, of what's going to happen. But you can do it.
Disclaimers are fine, but there is still a legal obligation on the organisers of whether it be a sport or an industry or whatever else to provide a safe workplace, which is in professional sport. That's what it is. And so, I can sign a disclaimer and say, I don't care, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I fully understand the risks. And I shouldn't have to fully understand the risks. My employer is responsible for that. So they've got, partially that responsibility.
Do you ever wish that we could have Gladiators come back?
No.
Would you ever go? I reckon that would have been insane to watch.
Having Christians fighting lions.
Having Christians fighting other Christians.
Which they've been doing for 2,000 years.
I can't imagine what it would have been like to be in the Colosseum and seeing people literally replicating war in front of you and for you in a safe way where you're not actually...
You have no risk.
Effectively. Assuming you're not in the front row.
But lions leap out of the enclosure.
It just seems like, for them, it would have been such a normal thing because I imagine the average person, especially in the Roman period, would have been so used to going to war, to having relatives that died in war, fought in war, to knowing people who came back after the war. It would have just been such a normal thing that, of course, we can do this as entertainment as well in the gladiatorial arena. And also you had slaves and criminals and, war captives that you just didn't give a crap about and thought, get in there. If you live, you live.
Yeah, exactly.
We might as well make some money out of them. But it blows my mind to think about what that must have been like as both a competitor, because it would have been that, MMA, it's kind of like, it's probably one of the sports, like with boxing, where it is the maximum stakes are at, like you could die.
You could die. Yeah.
But I think
it's combat.
The next step after that would be a gladiatorial thing where one of you must die for the other one to win effectively. Like it didn't always happen that way, but that I can't imagine what that next level of risk would have changed about how it felt to watch, how it felt to participate. Must have been a very, very phenomenally weird thing and crazy thing to watch.
Just a little bit barbaric for me, I think.
Yeah,
a little bit is an understatement.
Well, you could have watched the chariot races. You could leave before the real blood sports begin.
The real blood sport.
When they do just the
watch
kids'
the flag bearers come out on the horse. And they get right, I'm out of here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, I have no idea what we're talking about.
AFL.
Bye.
Gladiators. Alrighty, you mob, thank you so much for listening to or watching this episode of The Goss. If you would like to watch the video, if you're currently listening to it and not watching it, you can do so on the Aussie English channel on YouTube. You'll be able to subscribe to that. Just search Aussie English on YouTube. And if you're watching this and not listening to it, you can check this episode out also on the Aussie English podcast, which you can find via my free Aussie English podcast application on both Android and iPhone. You can download that for free, or you can find it via any other good podcast app that you've got on your phone. Spotify, podcasts from iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is. I'm your host, Pete. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a ripper of a day, and I will see you next time. Peace!